Hello everyone. This is a special episode that we recorded live at OggCamp 17 in Canterbury. It features myself and Martin along with Joe and Jesse from the Late Night Linux podcast. Hope you enjoy it. By the way, there's still time for you to enter our competition to win an Entroware Apollo laptop. Listen back to episode 22 for details of how to enter.
Hello everyone and welcome to Late Night Ubuntu Podcast at OggCamp. Late night at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, so we're going to do a bit of news first and then we're going to have some Q&A that has been submitted. We don't have a roaming mic, so I'm afraid none of you get to be on the podcast today unless you submitted a question and we decided to go for it. So let's start with a bit of news then. And the first one is that Nextcloud are partnering with various educational companies and organizations, including Moodle, and they're going to go for a big push into education. Now, I put this in because, Mark, don't you have something to do with Moodle?
I am a Moodle developer by day, yes. They're generally, this is an interesting thing to see that the direction that Nextcloud are going in. I mean, from the Moodle perspective, I don't think it's a massively surprising thing because Moodle has for a long time had repository plugins which let you just connect to another system which stores files, and then it'll pull those files in and serve them to users. So that's not a big deal from the Moodle point of view. But there is something about this which caught my eye, and that's the fact that they said their sort of next phase of development for this is going to be to include this plugin as part of the standard Moodle package. So what you tend to get with Moodle is you've got the Moodle core stuff, which is all the APIs and the database stuff, and then a load of plugins, and then you can download other plugins. But Moodle.org will distribute the core stuff with some core plugins as like a distribution of Moodle. And it's really quite unusual, especially more recently, for them to add another plugin to the core distribution. They have tended much more to say develop new stuff as plugins and we'll just let people download that if they want it. So there's obviously a deal being made here, I expect, for them to go the extra step of including this as a standard thing with Moodle.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. What's happening financially with this? Nextcloud must be making a few quid out of it. It's presumably a new revenue stream for them.
Well, it depends on, it could be that Nextcloud are using funding which they have to work with their partners to get Nextcloud integrated with these other systems, rather than each of those other systems paying Nextcloud for the integration. I suspect it's the first way around rather than the second way around.
Okay.
But this is Nextcloud, isn't it? It's almost like a fork of Nextcloud, isn't it? They're calling it their educational version, but it's basically we've selected these 10 applications that you can install as an educational university or something, or suite. 5 of them are new with partners such as Moodle, and the other 5 are standard. But it's basically Nextcloud been stripped down to make it easy for educators to use.
Yeah, I'd say it's more of a Nextcloud distribution than it is a fork. Because it's still the same Nextcloud core, isn't it? It's just with different apps installed. So like a different packaging.
Right, well, Martin's got nothing to say about this, so let's move on. Let's talk about Solus 3 has been released. And Solus, of course, is the distro that Ike makes. And he's on our podcast normally, but he's too poor to fly over from Ireland, unfortunately.
So does that mean we can say horrible things about Solus and we get no...
We've only got good things to say about Solus.
Well, yeah, no wonder you've only got good things to say, because one of the major things... Yeah, one of the major things here now is full Snap support.
Yep, it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. For those of you that weren't in my talk earlier, I work on the Snapcraft team, working to make snaps available on all Linux distributions. And Ike had evaluated the Snap and Flatpak ecosystem some months ago and decided that wasn't for him. Then elected to choose Flatpak and has now added full-blooded confined snap support to Solus. And he's really done this because it's a way for him to access software that his inclusion policy in Solus wouldn't normally permit. And it also gives him access to stuff that he can't package easily and has to use some third-party workarounds. So it's good for Solus and it's good for snaps.
Is it... Does it really sort of fly your flag when there's a distribution that wants to include snaps and they have to have someone from Canonical hold their hand specifically to take them through to having that in their distribution?
To be fair, there wasn't a lot of hand-holding in Ike's case. It was just introducing him to people should he need to seek additional assistance.
And convincing him to do it in the first place.
Well, I didn't actually have to convince him very much, to be honest with you. Once he'd taken a look at it and he saw the value it could add to Solus, he was kind of sold on the idea. It's a desktop operating system, but Snaps provides some server functionality. For example, Docker is a snap published by Docker. The whole Kubernetes suite is available as snaps. There's Nextcloud is a snap. There's easy ways to get software that he wouldn't ordinarily be able to access. And then there's some desktop stuff like Brave. But in terms of what was required, you do need AppArmor, which is provides the additional context for security controls and what have you. And Ike, the only question he asked is, was there someone on hand he could ask about those questions about how to integrate that? But as it happened, he really did it very quickly and much by himself.
So mentioning AppArmor brings us nicely onto our next news item, which is whether or not snaps should exist at all. It was raised as a bug originally in the Ubuntu bug reporting system, and then that's been moved over to a forum post. And it's from someone within, as far as I understand, the Ubuntu community. And they're just sort of questioning, well, if we've got Flatpak, should we be using snaps? Do we need this other competitor? Can we maybe learn from each other? And one of the things that was raised was that Flatpak's is able to confine things in ways that use standard things installed on all or nearly all Linux systems, whereas snaps require AppArmor. And an example, Solus has had to specifically implement AppArmor. There was a number of questions and reasons that he'd raised this, and I wondered what your view on that requirement for AppArmor was.
Well, AppArmor is an LSM. You choose one
What's
of the
an
two
LSM?
as Linux security something. I forget what the M stands for.
Quickly Google it.
Mandatory security controls. Ike didn't have an LSM implemented, he doesn't like SE Linux, which is the other option. So going with AppArmor wasn't a big deal. And AppArmor's mostly upstream now. So I think in the Linux 4.14 kernel, it's all going to be upstreamed with no additional patches required anyway. And the bug that was raised was more of an opinion piece that was posted on
it doesn't seem
the
like
bug
the kind of
tracker.
thing which you should raise as a bug.
Yeah, it should have been a blog post, really.
Yeah, and also it wasn't a community member because they'd signed up for an account, posted an opinion piece in the bug. And it's all very hand-wavy. Everyone's adopting Flatpak. Okay.
66% of people.
Apparently, yeah. Statistics. What's the saying? 84% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Yeah. But one point that is sort of at least hinted at in it is that sort of, can you really trust Canonical not to drop things in the future? Because look at what they have done with Unity 8 and Convergence and the whole mobile thing. They basically did a bit of a Google on that, didn't they? Developed it for a while and then just completely dropped it out of the blue. And okay, looking at it from the outside right now, it seems very unlikely that they're going to do the same with snaps, but you never know. That risk is there.
This was one of the sort of more valid things. Like, I was reading this, I was just thinking, this is just someone, complaining about, thinking everything's a zero-sum game. Why develop this when there's another thing? But then, what did occur to me was, given that Ubuntu has just done basically what they're suggesting might happen, which is go with the other thing. So instead of carrying on with Mir as the main desktop option, go with Wayland and so on. Instead of carrying on with Unity, go with GNOME. It did make me think, okay, maybe there is a valid point to be made given that there's an alternative packaging format. By the way, I'm incredibly not excited about packaging formats. But so this is the one point I have to make about this. But yeah, given that there's another packaging format, why not use that one instead? I did think that there might be some validity to that argument in the first place.
Martin's going to get his work hat on now.
Yeah, so those of you that don't know, full disclosure, I work for Canonical, who's the company behind Ubuntu, and
don't you have something to do with snaps?
I work on the Snapcraft team.
I didn't put this in just to troll you or anything.
No, you did. The answer to the question about, will Canonical drop it? As you may know, Canonical's been through a massive restructuring recently, and there's now a focus on getting Canonical as a company profitable. And Ubuntu and projects within Ubuntu, there's a lot of skunk work projects, lots of moonshoot projects that were absorbing lots of money and were kind of sexy and interesting, but they weren't going to deliver financially. So a lot of that stuff's been knocked on the head. And there's now a refocusing on the stuff that the business is going to be built on. And snaps are central to that story.
Well, yeah, that's the feeling that I get is that snaps are very important. And with the IoT stuff, it's absolutely essential. And that's one of the few areas that they're actually making some money at. So it would seem very unlikely to me that they would drop snaps. But you never know. They might go to Flatpak or something else that isn't mainstream yet.
Or might find ways to interoperate with Flatpak.
Ooh. Is that a hint there?
Might be.
That's Martin's non-disclosure agreement face.
Right, well, let's end the news with a bit of good news, and that is that GNOME has turned 20. Can you believe it? And Debian has turned 24. So that means that's older than you, Mark.
Not quite. It's catching me up.
Yeah, but not a lot to say, but it's just amazing that these free software projects have been around for so long. And yeah, okay, look around this room. Almost everyone here is using stuff. There might be some KDE Arch users in here, but I'm sure we've all used Debian-based distros at some point. But it just goes to show that after all this time, apart from the kind of people who are in this room, most normal people haven't even heard of Linux or GNOME or anything like that. So it was supposed to be good news, this, to end on. And
Should we sing Happy Birthday?
No, let's not do that.
No, is it out of copyright yet? I don't know.
No.
I don't risk it.
It was never. It should never have been considered in copyright in the first place, I think.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers did have to pay a lot of money to a lot of people recently, though, so that was good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the Q&A section. So we've got some questions from you guys here who put them in the box, and we had some from the Google form and stuff before. But I thought we'd start with a question each, a question each from one of us, except Martin didn't do one because he was too lazy or something. So let's start with yours, Jesse.
Okay, so my question was, if you had £1 million, how would you put that into open source and free software, and what would you want the outcome to be? So we all have this thing where you daydream that you've won the lottery, and I often think I've daydreamed on the lottery. I've bought my house, I've done my things, and now I would then pump £1 million into a open source free software, and I just wonder what your view would be. Would you put it into a fledgling distribution to try and make the distribution you want? Would you try and pay a particular piece of software? Maybe I should be thinking more about security and or maybe open source advocacy and getting the word out there.
I would probably look for as many software projects that I use who have some kind of monthly donation subscription thing. So the one related thing which I do at the moment is I give £5 a month to the Open Rights Group. So I would probably find as many things like that where I would kind of think, I can afford £5 a month, but I can't necessarily afford £50 a month going to all these various things every month. But if I had £1 million surplus just sitting there being, I'd probably just find as many things as possible and give, £5 a month to as many things as I could, just as a, keeping the project going kind of fund.
Okay, so yeah, you've come at the opposite end from where I would go with it. I would just take my £1 million and pump it all into one thing in one massive hit. Now, I agree.
And do you know what that thing is?
Have I decided? I think, given that it's fictional money,
yeah.
I would go on to DistroWatch. I would go down to about 30-ish.
Oh, actually, that's quite good. We're about there.
And I'd maybe, I don't know, I'd like to see what a distribution could do with £1 million of and they could fund all sorts of things, and where they'd end up. There'd be no point in putting it into a canonical based thing because they have a lot of money to do things with.
Yeah.
If you can get to the point where you have a developer who is paid, you'll end up with something like Solus. So I sort of wonder what you could do with that. So I wouldn't spread wide and thin, but I do agree with your point that you would end up with projects that know they could continue into the future if you've given them £1,000 a month or whatever for the next however many years.
So your point rather neatly lines up with mine. So in my spare time, I work on the Mate desktop, and that's a very small team of people that work on it in their spare time. And if I won £1 million, I would form a company and hire the 4 or 5 people that are the core Mate contributors to work on that full time. Because I think it's, maybe you would disagree, but what I see on day-to-day basis, the amount of work that gets done by this small group of people doing it in their spare time, and I would love to see what we could do when we were all working together on it on a full-time basis, and actually drag that traditional desktop environment up with modern standards in terms of hardware support and what
How long would £1 million last doing that? Depends how much you pay them.
For that, it does depend how much you pay them and how well you invest the surplus to try and make it, last longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, mine's tangentially related. I would invest in convergence, basically, of mobile and desktop. That might seem a bit strange, and that's been done and didn't work, but I would invest it in Maru OS.
There we go. Right.
That's not really convergence, though, is it?
Well,
that's like dual booting.
Somewhat. So for those who don't know,
what is Maru?
Yeah, so Maru OS is basically an Android open source project-based ROM for a couple of phones and a tablet, which act just like Android most of the time. But then if you plug a screen in and a keyboard and mouse, you get a Debian desktop, which uses, I think, LexD or LexC containers in order to work. And it's a bit rough around the edges. It's very much a sort of community project at the moment. But I think that is the vision of convergence that I really want to see. I don't want to have the same experience on a tiny screen as a huge desktop or laptop. And so that's how I think convergence should have worked. Base it on Android, which we know works, and Debian or Ubuntu or Arch or whatever that we also know works, and don't try and reinvent stuff. Just mash things together in a skillful and a proper way.
So I don't think it's convergence because you've got your Android environment siloed from your desktop environment. So there's no sharing of data or accounts or information. So there is no convergence.
Yeah, but there could be quite easily. Well, no, I say quite with £1 million investment, it could be quite easy to make that happen. As far as I'm concerned.
So you're saying take what exists and actually seamlessly combine them.
You have a UI which is and apps which are specific to the platform, but the data is shared between them.
Yeah, I mean that's all just config files at the end of the day, isn't it?
No.
Well, okay, that's a gross oversimplification of it, but it is with £1 million of investment. I think you could get something that is, potentially worthy of being a consumer product, because you're not with what Canonical tried to do with Ubuntu Phone. They started completely from scratch, and so they probably spent a lot more than £1 million on it, but they didn't have this basis already that we have with Maru, which, as I say, Android we know works reasonably well, and Debian we know works really well, and there's no technical reason why it couldn't be Ubuntu or any other distro. So anyway, that's my answer, that I would like to see proper convergence, because I always wanted it to happen. And I criticised it quite a lot for how they went about it, and in the end, it died.
So Windows Phone then?
Yeah.
I forgot my caveat about not just pumping money into your own project, but I'm now too late for that. However, moving on to our next question.
So Mark, you're one about freemium fast.
Okay, right. So there's a bit of background to this. I use a project called MB, which is an open source media streaming server. So I have a server at home with all my media on, and I can stream it to other devices. Now they have essentially a freemium model. So you get the basic version, which gives you a library of your files and lets you stream them to other things. But you can also pay for extra features like syncing to mobile devices. Now I tried out the premium version, decided I didn't want it. Now, if you try and play something through the web interface with the free version, you get a pop-up which shows you the features that you could get from the premium version. And originally, there was a button that said continue. Now, when you do it, you click it and it pops up. and the button that did say continue says wait 15 seconds and counts down 15 seconds, and then you can play your files.
As that pushed you over the edge.
So I raised a bug on the MB tracker, basically saying that this is essentially an anti-feature. This is something which has been introduced specifically to degrade the user experience and should therefore be removed. So basically, my question, but the counter argument is that they are trying to make money to sustain the product. So if they put something in which encourages people to pay, then that's not really a bug. So my question really is, it's in two parts. First of all, is a project justified in adding things that make their software worse in order to sustain the project? And secondly, given that this is a GPL project and someone has now created a fork with just the premium version enabled by default, is it ethical to do that if you disagree with what they're doing to it? So, yes, who would like to start?
Well, I would just say that I used to use a product called Subsonic, which is a bit like MB, except it's just for music. So it's like be your own Spotify at home. You could load all of your MP3s on Oggs and Flax and what have you, and stream it onto your mobile devices. And they used to have a pay what you want model. Then that became a lifetime subscription model if you wanted to unlock like certain features. And then they wanted it to be a pay monthly model. And what happened is that people who had bought the lifetime license were now being nagged because their license wasn't being renewed on a monthly basis, and that was the position I was in. So somebody forked that project to strip out all of the license checking because it was an open source project. And what's happened now, Subsonic has gone closed source because the developer's trying to protect his revenue stream, but somebody has now initiated a fork called LibreSonic from the point at which it was last an open source project.
Have you answered Mark's question?
I don't think you've just given another example.
That's my background. Is it ethical?
So in that case, were they right to make it closed source in order to sustain the project?
Yeah, they're free to do whatever they want because they created the software and they can relicense it.
Okay.
And I don't think anyone's done anything wrong by creating a fork from the last open source version of that software.
Okay.
Because they're filling a need for people that wanted to use that product. And I had no objection to paying, but I was being asked to double dip.
I think that the question as to whether it's ethical or not to fork it isn't the right question, really, because it's GPL software. The ethics are not in question. If
the project dies as a result of it being forked,
well, that's
which could happen.
But then the project hasn't died. It's just a product that has died.
Yeah, but I think the question is it polite to do that?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, but what you're going to do is it's free software.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible that the answer is they chose the wrong business model given that they're using the GPL.
Yeah.
Or chose the wrong license in the first place.
Or chose the wrong license for the business model they wanted.
Yeah.
Jesse, do you have any thoughts?
So this most closely ties in with Android apps for me. They're the ones that I get bugged to pay for.
Yeah.
And generally, if you're using an application, for me, I'm trying to find a good radio app that I can cast, so I can get it onto all my audio devices in the house on Google Casts. And the one that I've settled on, I really like, and it has smooth interface. It's very nice. It casts well. It's great. And it just pops up with ads all the blooming time. And I want a way to pay them because apps and stuff are like a $5. Yeah. It's like I want to just pay to get rid of all those and have a nice smooth experience. But you don't have that option. I've looked on the website. I've looked on the about. There's no way of having a paid for model. So it's actually I would like there to be a paid for model. I'm coming from the opposite side. But I think it sounds like we don't know what the finances were behind MB.
Yeah.
And if they had a system where they asked people to pay and they had a certain uptake, and that uptake was not enough to financially sustain their development, they obviously have got to go to the next level, which is get annoying in your face.
Yes.
And that feels like it's gone too far, but we don't know what the finances are behind it. And maybe there's a can you suggest a better way of doing it? Because I agree, the click to continue, you can say, right, I'm choosing to click to continue. And as soon as, YouTube ads, as soon as there's an ad that's more than 30 seconds, I'm almost like, do I want to watch this YouTube video that much?
Yeah. But then, I suppose the difference is it's my music I do want to listen to it that much. That's why I've set up this system.
Right. It's all okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it's all stored locally.
Yeah.
It's all on the server. Oh, there's going to be some other open source project you can use.
Yeah, and
Well,
and
that could be the
if you're going to potentially make your project nagware, then you are inviting people to leave and go elsewhere. So that's a poor decision in my mind.
Fair enough. Yep.
You should add value to your product to compel people to pay for it, not nag them into ponying up money.
Yeah, not degrade the free version.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So a couple of questions that somewhat go together. How did you get into using Linux? That's from MadBob78. And what distro do you use and why? That's from Thomas Morgan.
So this is our Linux origin story.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Who's going to go first then?
Okay, I got into Linux. I was working in retail systems like Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's and that sort of thing, and we had Xenix and SCO Unix that we were using on some of the back-end stuff. And I was really taken with the fact that this Unix thing could do multitasking and Microsoft DOS couldn't. And I couldn't afford Xenix or SCO Unix. And I happened to find out there was this thing called Linux, which was just like these expensive Unix systems that I had. So I went and found, I think it was Idrisil Linux in the like 94, something like that, and that was my first Linux, and that's how I got started.
I think I was at university, and everyone had XP, the flagship that is was, and it must have been a drunk, hazy, crazy night. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've been dicking around with this Linux thing, and I can almost get the wireless to work. Aren't I good?" And so he knew that I was sort of nerdy and enjoyed tinkering as much as you could with the Microsoft products. And so he said, you should really give it a go. I sort of dipped my toe in a little bit, but it was only after I left university I didn't need a computer to work every single time I opened it, and I could then allow myself to tinker to the point where I could understand it, and now it works every time I open it.
And occasionally DD over your hard disk.
Yeah, so I don't understand that much. So it was, shortly after university I was introduced by a friend.
Cool.
So my origin story revolves around XP as well. So I was pretty poor at the time, and I am a musician, and I wanted to record music and stuff. And so I had a P4 box with 512 of RAM, 512 megabytes of RAM. And this wasn't even that long ago, to be honest. It was only about 10 years ago, maybe. And so I had to squeeze every bit of performance out of that machine. And so I got into Nlight. I don't know if anyone's heard of Nlight. It's a way to strip down Windows ISOs and take out all the bloat and all the security and all the rest of it. And I managed to...
Sounds like a great idea.
Well, it is a great idea if you've got a machine that's not connected to the network. Okay. If you only want to run a specific set of applications, music making stuff.
Fair enough.
And synths and all the rest of it. But that obviously leaves you the problem of, do you connect it to the internet, the network, and be completely insecure, or do you dual boot with Linux? And that's what I started to do. I got into Linux, and I was experimenting with it for a bit, and then in the end, I just said, right, we're going to use this as the main operating system, and just kept Windows around for the little things that I needed. And so it was basically... the insecurity of Windows that pushed me over to the security of Linux. And now I wouldn't even log into my email on a Windows machine.
And which distro did you use?
Oh, yeah, we didn't answer that. I started with Ubuntu.
You haven't done your origin story either yet.
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, I started with Ubuntu, and then I went all around the houses. I tried all different distros, some that were really lightweight and all the rest of it. And then settled on Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu with XFCE, and I just stick to the LTSs and just have very few problems, and things just work.
Cool. Okay, so my origin story, I think, comes from two places. First of all, I used to be part of an online role-playing forum called Nation States, which was hosted on a really dodgy server, and I was using Internet Explorer at the time. And so you would write a really long post, and then you'd press submit, and then you would just get like a 500 error page, and you've lost your post. And someone posted on the forum saying, oh, if you use this Mozilla browser, it doesn't do that. It just pops up a dialogue saying like no data, and then you can press submit again. So I downloaded that and then found out about this open source thing. And then I think a couple of years later, I was playing. So yeah, we were using Windows 2000, I think, on our PC at home, and I got into playing with things like window blinds in Aston Shell, which basically let you customize the look and feel. And there were themes which mimicked Linux desktops at the time. So there was one which mimicked KDE. And I thought, oh, this looks fancy and bright and colourful. I wonder what KDE is. So I looked it up and found out, oh, that's this open source thing as well. And then I'd heard about this Linux thing through another friend. And so I think I downloaded Knoppix and started running it as a live CD with like some persistent storage. But since I think the first time I actually properly installed it to a hard disk, I used Ubuntu and have basically used it ever since.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I should have mentioned that the idea that you can do these live boots and have a completely working system, that was basically what made me use it in the first place.
That was incredible. Like putting Knoppix in and seeing it do the boot where you have all this coloured text come down. It says, oh, you've got this hardware, you've got this hardware, you've got this hardware. You're like, oh, I didn't know I had that. And yeah, just knowing that it can do all of this stuff. And I was just like, oh, this is the most amazing thing I've ever put in my computer.
Yeah, we take it for granted now that you can have a live environment.
Yeah.
But that is still quite a big thing. I mean, you don't even have that with Windows, do you? I don't think.
No.
It's still to this day. And it can be so useful. And for me, being able to try out all the different Linux distros like that is what swayed me, I think.
So what's your distro of choice these days, Mark?
It's still Ubuntu.
Right.
Still stock Ubuntu at the moment. But
was it Kubuntu for a while?
It was, right. So, yes, I think I started off with KDE. I tried GNOME. So, yeah, I tried my very first live CD was Knoppix, which was based on Ubuntu Warty, the very first Ubuntu release, and then I tried. I think Breezy was the first Ubuntu release. So yeah, I tried that, and I basically stuck with that until I think Ubuntu 12.04, when Unity swayed me with its charms.
So Martin, what distro do you use?
I use the mighty Ubuntu Mate. And
really,
by popular demand, I will be doing the Ubuntu Mate 17.10 preview talk again tomorrow for those of you that missed it today.
But you didn't used to use Ubuntu Mate, did you? What did you used to use?
Well, prior to doing Ubuntu Mate Arch Linux, I was an Arch Linux TU, so that's developer for Arch Linux. And prior to that, Ubuntu, and prior to that, Crux, which is sort of what actually inspired Arch.
Oh, interesting.
And Jesse, you use Arch, don't you?
I'm sort of in flux at the moment, and
is that another distro?
Never quite sure what distro's got on his hard disk, or how it got there.
The distro that I want to use, I don't think's yet been made, so I'm still messing about. I've just put Solus, coincidentally, given the news, just put Solus on my laptop, and we'll be giving Ike some feedback on that.
So what's missing? What are you looking for in a Linux distribution which doesn't currently exist?
I quite like GNOME, but I don't necessarily like it being on top of it. I don't want it to be on top of Ubuntu, and solely out of the fact that I know it and I'm comfortable in it. It's like a nice little home I can go back to.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily learn anything by breaking things.
Okay.
And so that's sort of why I went round to Arch, was because you try things and you mess it up, and you learn a lot more by doing that.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think I learn a lot less now than I did in my first couple of years.
You know, all these things like rollback on snaps and things like this.
Yeah.
Your hand is held, and it's very comfortable and it's very safe, and that's absolutely fantastic. But I don't necessarily need safe. I
like to live on the edge, don't you?
Yeah, the bleeding edge or nothing. Yeah.
Sounds like you need Gen 2. Right.
I don't have that much time.
Tangentially related still. Next question. In a world with only one single Linux distro, would you still use Linux?
Okay, I have to ask, are we looking at this from the point of view of there's only ever been one, and there is one, and that's all the world knows, or tomorrow everything but Fedora is removed?
Oh, you've specifically picked Fedora there?
Yeah, it's the first one that came to mind.
In either case, I think I'd answer yes, because I find it interesting to use and I like the way it does things. And yeah, so I'd still use Linux.
Well, yeah, I'd rather use Unity than Windows. And that's saying something.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I would still use Linux because, not that it's Linux, but because of the licenses that sit around all of that software, it enables me to collaborate with people. And that's what I'm really interested in doing in my spare time, is working with other people who are like-minded and making stuff. And it's the licenses around all of that software that make that happen. So I would continue to use it for that reason.
And of course, we assume that if there's only one Linux distro, then everyone who's currently working on Linux distros will be working on that as one big happy family, and they get loads done.
It'd be the mega distro, yeah. It's like that April Fool's joke that came out.
I don't remember that one.
Oh, there was an April Fool's like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was an announcement that Arch and Ubuntu and Gentoo and Fedora were going to take the package management from Arch, the kernel from Ubuntu, the way in which Gentoo does its install or whatever it was, and like take the best of all and make this mega one. And everyone got really excited, and then it was like April Fool's.
Oh, well. Right, let's move on. This is another anonymous one. Shuttleworth abandoning Unity 8 and Convergence, an admission of failure. Where next for Ubuntu? Well, clearly, yes, it was an admission of failure.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt from the announcements, there's no doubt in the tone that's what it was. Yeah,
Yeah, it was like, we tried, it didn't work.
People didn't want it didn't work.
Yeah.
So yes, to that bit. Where next for Ubuntu? I don't know. Maybe we should ask someone who knows what's going on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. So, the more I hear about IoT things, and the more I hear about the way in which Ubuntu Core is being made, I just want everyone who makes an IoT device to use Ubuntu Core. And I as someone who isn't invested in Ubuntu, I just thought I'd say that on an open platform.
Well, thank you. So what's going on at Ubuntu? I mentioned this earlier. There's been a reorganization of the company, and for those, I think a lot of people here are probably what we classify as enthusiasts. You're people using Linux on the desktop. You're interested in making Raspberry Pis, all of that sort of stuff. So you probably care about the Linux desktop, and the investment from Ubuntu is still there in the Linux desktop. They're making the transition away from Unity. So the Unity 8 project, which was the convergence project to bring tablets and phones and the desktop all harmonized under one code, that's been axed and that's been picked up by the community. Unity 7 is now effectively end of life. And Ubuntu are moving to GNOME. So the next Ubuntu desktop, 17.10, in October, will be based on GNOME 3. And you'll be presented with two login options, sessions. You'll have an Ubuntu session, which will be GNOME with customizations to deliver the Ubuntu experience on top of GNOME 3, and there will be a vanilla GNOME 3. So if you are a GNOME fan and you like your extensions in a particular way, you can use that one and customize it the way you like it.
So if you're like someone who currently uses Ubuntu GNOME,
yeah,
you can carry on using it like
exactly.
that. Right.
And what's a Ubuntu tweak that makes it more familiar? Are you talking about a taskbar down the left-hand side like Unity? Is that sort of thing?
Yeah, so they're going to add a dock. So there's been a number of polls and opinion surveys gathered through the likes of Hacker News and OMG Ubuntu and Reddit. They've been posted in various places, and all of that data was actually collected up and analyzed internally. And there was an overwhelming demand for that dock down the side. So there's going to be a lightweight dock that's being added to facilitate that requirement. But the other thing that came out of that was stuff should just work better. So Bluetooth,
easy.
Bluetooth should just work. Audio should just work. The trackpad should do gestures. Hardware video acceleration should just work like it does on the other platforms. So actually, a lot of what's going on in Ubuntu right now isn't so much about what's going to happen on the skin on the top. I know that we've triaged 1,000 bugs in the Bluetooth stack, and there's been hundreds of fixes go back through that. The same with Network Manager. The same is true on Pulse Audio, and also fixing bugs in various points in the stack with video acceleration so that we'll be able to deliver hardware acceleration across the board. So it's those sorts of things that are driving this now, just to make everything work better.
So this definitely isn't an abandonment of Linux on the desktop, as some people have been saying.
That was sort of the death knell of Ubuntu was declared when this news came out, and
that was when the buttons moved.
No, it was
yeah. So no, the Ubuntu desktop will continue on, and commercial interests for Canonical are server cloud and IoT.
And most importantly, the buttons are going back to the proper size.
They've already moved.
Yes. Right. So the idea of this Q&A was that it wouldn't all be Linuxy stuff, but it seems that most of them are. But a question that I had that seems somewhat timely. Do you think GoDaddy, Google, Cloudflare, etc., were right to refuse the far right websites as customers? So there's been a lot of stuff going on in America, as we know, that's pretty bad, and some very hateful, horrible people have had their websites effectively censored by these companies. And the question is, do you think that those companies were in the right to do that?
Okay. My answer to that is, well, there is obviously a big philosophical debate behind this, but given that this is a technology podcast, I'm going to keep it short. Essentially, my answer is yes, because I don't believe that being tolerant means you have to tolerate intolerance.
Well, I unsurprisingly disagree.
I thought you would.
Yeah, because as I say,
because you hate freedom.
Well, right. These people who want to spout this racist, horrible stuff, that's part of free speech. That's the price you pay for free speech. You have to have the right to say horrible things, and I have to have the right to say that you are a horrible person for doing that, and to point that out. And when you start censoring people, where does it end? Now, conversely, I think that these companies have every right to censor whatever they want. They're private companies. If it was ICANN, we might be talking about a different thing. If ICANN were denying people domains, then there's no competition there. But you can always find someone else, in theory, for your web host or whatever, someone who doesn't mind your intolerant views. And I think that you do have to tolerate intolerance, and you do have to point it out. I mean, I think we're just philosophically opposed on this issue.
I before I gave my answer, I already knew that we would be. Having had discussions with you before, I'm sort of aware of your position. So in this case, I'm not going to use this podcast to try and argue you out of that position, but I do disagree with you.
So I see both sides of the argument. On the one hand, I agree that these websites have got abhorrent material on them and it shouldn't be out there. But it's also the thin end of the wedge of censoring these sites. If it becomes the norm that this is acceptable and then it starts encroaching, what's the next thing that gets censored or taken down? So I have concerns from that point of view. And also, I don't have a problem with these sites existing and these people being given a platform. I don't know if you remember some years ago, Nick Griffin from the BMP was on Question Time. And it was absolutely brilliant for exposing just how clueless he was. And everyone was able to see. Well, everyone was able to see that for themselves. And sometimes having platforms like this and for them to put their views across, you can see just how incompatible their thinking is with most of society.
Jesse, you're a proper authoritarian. What do you think?
I guess if we're at a point with these sorts of websites that everyone in society agrees they're a bad thing. Like if there's the decapitation videos and things like this on YouTube, no one is surprised when they're taken down. And I think if as a society we're agreed that this is something which shouldn't have a platform on which to spread, then we should lock it down.
Well, unfortunately, not everyone thinks that the kind of racist views are bad. There are a lot of people, especially in America, who agree with that stuff. And, yes,
but those are the people who we shouldn't be giving the platform to.
Yeah.
But who decides?
Tricky.
We do as a society. We say, no, that's going to lead to us having our freedom to decide this taken away from us. So therefore, we need to stop it before it gets to that point.
Well, you've convinced me, Mark. So.
As I knew I would.
Okay, right. So This is a much lighter one, thankfully. What is the most intriguing computer sold with Linux pre-installed in the last 18 months? Now, there is clearly one correct answer to this, which I will tell you in a minute, but Mark?
Intriguing computer. Well, you see, I feel like I should give a more interesting answer than this because it seems like there's probably loads of really cool, like small single board computers doing all sorts of stuff or embedded devices. But I've been reviewing a lot of laptops and stuff for the Ubuntu podcast. And we've been talking about other machines like that. So I actually really liked the Dell, what was it? Precision 5510 or 5520, which I reviewed, 5520, which I reviewed. It is the best laptop I've ever used. And it kind of blew me away with how amazing it is. And it's sold with Ubuntu pre-installed.
Okay, so I don't have the benefit of lots and lots of laptops coming through my front door to review, and that hard life that you lead.
Late Night Linux needs to up the game.
Well, we have been offered, but for some reasons we've declined. Put it that way.
So I think I see one on the table. Is that an XPS 13?
Yes.
My answer would be an XPS 13. I think having a flagship laptop, which is important to say, we're not just giving it away on a netbook or something rubbish that Linux makes the most out of the low hardware. Give it good hardware, let it fly, have a really nice screen, have all those things that you want. It's nice and thin. It's got all the tick boxes that you want from a laptop, but it also has longevity. And I think there's an important point to make. It's on its fourth iteration? Fifth. And so Dell has obviously gone out, put their toe in the water and said, it's quite warm, let's carry on. And they've carried on making them and putting them out, and they're clearly selling. And I know that more, because of the success of the XPS 13, more laptops like the one you mentioned, Mark, are coming out with Linux from Dell. And that's why I think that's an important laptop.
Yes. Dell may be growing their portfolio of Linux devices.
Yet more inside.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to deliberately avoid the one correct answer to leave that for Joe. The most intriguing device in the last 18 months is, of course, the Entroware Athena, which they have on their website right now, pre-installed with Ubuntu Mate. For personal reasons, but also it was a real workhorse machine. I had a massive...
Are those personal reasons because you named it?
I did name that one, as it happens, yes.
You also named Late Night Linux, fun fact.
I did, this is true. But the reason I like the Athena is I had a really big dual Xeon Tower computer, and it had 32 gigs of RAM in it, and it had an NVIDIA graphics card in it, and it took 750 watts of power, and it was like hip height. It was massive. And the Entroware Athena that I got to replace it has 64 gigs of RAM, an 8-core CPU, 3 terabytes of SSD storage, and an NVIDIA 980M in it. And it's just like a total workhorse machine. And this laptop that's in a 15.6-inch form factor replaced this massive machine, and I thought that was fantastic.
Well, they have been pretty boring answers, I think, because they are desirable. That XPS 13 that I'm looking at here is probably the most desirable computer running Linux, and I would love to be able to afford one, but I can't. Obviously, you've got all the Entroware ones and, System 76 and all the rest of that. That is, it's good to have all that. But for me, they're desirable, but not intriguing. What is intriguing for me is the GPD Pocket. That is the only correct answer. Is that one up there? Right, yeah. I must have a look at that later.
Mine's in the post.
Nice. We'll both be pleased because it's running Ubuntu Mate by the sounds of things, or at least Mate. And so what's interesting about it is a tablet screen with it's a 7-inch tablet screen in a tiny little sort of almost sub-netbook form factor, but with a fairly reasonable Atom chip in it. I'm very interested to hear about whether or not it will run vanilla distributions.
I'll tell you what, here's an idea. You're right at the back. How about tomorrow, if possible, John, we have another lightning talk slot, and I invite you to tell us about that device tomorrow. All right, well, do a half-hour presentation and write it up. I'm sure plenty of people come. I agree. I backed the GPD Pocket as well, so that's on its way. And I also backed another one that's very similar called the Gemini, which is a similar type of device. So that's not due until like November, December time. But yeah, they're really small form factor, like netbooks of old, but very, very tiny. I'm very curious about how they'll perform.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% convinced that they'd deliver on the Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever it was, so I didn't back it and now somewhat regret it. Although, I don't know. Oh, there's a shake of the head. So, yeah, well, I look forward to checking it out later. All right, well, we've got a few minutes left. So the last one, how do you all feel about the threat of a web browser monoculture with regards to so many open source browsers utilizing some form of WebKit or Blink and Firefox seemingly losing market share to Chrome? Is there room for a new rendering engine, e.g. NetSurf, or is it too late and should we all just resign ourselves to Googly Doom?
Googly Doom is the name of my new death metal band.
Yeah. And this is from someone whose name I can't pronounce. So
It's a screen name. He's not just...
Yeah. It's just a load of random characters. So, well, I mean, Firefox are trying to fight back. Mozilla trying to fight back with Firefox, but if you look at any stats, basically Chrome is just totally dominant now. I still use Firefox, but I suppose the question is there room for another engine? For me, no. I don't think that we should waste the effort on that because if we all concentrate on Firefox and make that as good as it possibly can be, then it's got more of a chance of being able to compete with Chrome. Not that it's got any chance at all, I don't think, unfortunately. I think that it will continue. They've got enough money to keep developing it. I'm going to keep using it for the time being. The latest release, 55, is probably the best one for a long time, and it has improved. Once they make it so that the old extensions stop working, I think it's going to have another drop off a cliff when people move over to Chrome where the extensions will work. But yeah, short answer, no. Concentrate on Firefox.
Yeah, so you're drawing comparisons there with Chrome and Firefox, and this is more about Blink and WebKit, which are similar technologies. Blink is derived from WebKit that most of the browsers use. And I think, well, having one library, I'm always a bit cautious about monoculture, but having all of the browsers work against the same rendering engine is good for us from a point of view of performance and security and consistency of standards. And I don't think we should create another one. The other one is what Mozilla are producing, and any additional effort should be focused there. And I think that those are the two that we should be standing side by side and having compete on features.
Yeah, I think that generally sounds like a sensible answer. I mean, that my point of view is from a web developer, it is a pain having lots of rendering engines to worry about because you get, I mean, even when everything is based on WebKit, if you develop something which works on Chrome and Firefox and then expect it to work in Safari, you're laughing, really. There's all sorts of things which just come and bite you. So, but that said, I do like having Firefox and Chrome. Yeah, it's having the competition so that, and in fact, IE as well, having the competition there so that they keep developing new features and keep getting them into browsers rather than just debating standards for ages. Someone will take it and implement it and then standardize it for rolling out. I think that seems to work reasonably well. I mean, things certainly move a lot quicker than they used to from that point of view of actually getting things available for developers to build on.
I can't get the effort to care.
Right, well, we're 5 minutes short, but that means 5 minutes closer to pub o'clock. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. This has been the Late Night Ubuntu Linux Podcast.